Hey everyone, David C. Anderson here, coming at you from the Knife Center, and welcome to Knife AQ, episode number 95, the knife series, where I answer all your questions, whether they're sharp or dull. And this week, amongst other things, we're taking a look at thin-bladed knives and thick-bladed knives, and why you might want to choose one over the other. Let's get into it. All right, if you're new to this series, the deal is this. You folks leave your questions, knife-related, sometimes otherwise, but usually knife-related, down in the comments section below these videos, and we will go through and pick out a few good ones to feature in a future episode. So that's the deal. All right, our first question today comes from Chase Purdue, who says, may I request a video on blade geometry? You may request it. I've heard the phrase geometry cuts, but is there more you can tell us about the details? Sure thing. So I guess the feeling or the drive or thrust, it's a good knife-related word, the thrust of the phrase geometry cuts is it gets to the fact that the less resistance you have behind an edge, the easier it should be able to cut through something. And I think a great way to kind of give an example of this with two like things is the Spyderco Indela right here. You've got your standard blade shape with a full flat grind, and you've got the Emerson Wave version with a saber flat grind. Very different cutting characteristics between these two. You know, take a look at the spine. They start out the same thickness, just a little bit under 1/8 of an inch. But because of the full flat grind and the tapering nature of the blade shape on the standard version, the thickness gets less and less as you go down towards the edge itself. Versus the more full thickness spine you see on the Emerson Wave version, obviously that creates a little bit more resistance when you're cutting through something. Now, depending on what you're cutting, it may or may not make much of a difference. Something that, classic example we like to give, if you're breaking down boxes, like big boxes of cardboard, thinner blades will bind up less as you slice through it. Thicker blades will take a little bit more effort. It's just kind of the nature of the beast. And you can apply this towards just these like-minded things right here. Very cool knives, by the way. Now, of course, blade thickness overall is also going to have an impact on the geometry and also the edge itself. How thin or thick it is behind the edge is part of the geometry as well. Take, for instance, this Civivi Cogent. It has an extremely thin, sharpened edge. A lot of Civivis do, in fact, which on this blade here, which is similar blade thickness to that Indela, also has a high flat grind, is going to be nice and efficient, nice and bitey right behind that edge as well. So take a look at all the factors when you're thinking about the geometry and what geometry is going to cut best for you, whether it's thin, something like this, or if you need something thicker, for example. Hope that helps. All right, next question comes from Matt Lynch. Hey, DCA and team, might be a simple question, but one I can't find an answer to. What's an ideal blade height, assuming blade length is equal? I think there's a reason you can't find an answer to that question. It's honestly because there isn't one. And I'm not trying to cop out here, but it truly is, there is no one single ideal for geometry. Let's get right down to it. That's what we're talking about here. Because, we'll take two different knives right here, that Indela we just looked at, and this Artisan Cutlery Proponent, Knife Center exclusive right here. Very different knives. Similar enough blade lengths. In fact, sharpened edge on these, pretty close, not too far off. Both of them are ideal for different things. The Indela is going to be a much finer slicer, a little bit, compared to this other knife, it's going to be a little more delicate, a little more deft, a little more precise. Is that ideal? Again, depends on your needs. What if you need something that you might be tempted to abuse a little more, take a little bit more of a beating? Well, maybe something with a thicker blade stock. Because again, you're talking about, height versus length. Thickness comes into play. Again, you have to consider that as far as everything else goes. For instance, if they made this Indela in a blade stock as thick as this proponent and still gave it a full flat grind like this, it's gonna be a very different beast and might be less ideal for a more precise cutter. But then again, it's gonna be more robust too. So not meaning to kind of like throw your question under the bus, but you know, you have to consider what you need your knife to do for you and then approach it from the back end that way first. If you need something more robust that can take a bit of a beating, that you can be more indiscriminate in how it is used, maybe you want something a little thicker. Again, thickness is not something you even mentioned here, but that's something that should be considered. If you need something to just, you know, open boxes, open the mail, open packages from the store, something thinner might be more ideal. Hope that helps, truly. All right, next question comes from Rail Childress. Hey DCA, thanks for the content. I like to carry thin-bladed pocket knives from time to time. I have a Civivi Lumi and a Spyderco Ladybug in K390, but I've not been able to find many knives in the 3 to 3.5 inch blade range with a thickness of less than 0.125, so that's 1/8 of an inch. Must be a locking blade, and my price range is $40 to $150. So yeah, no worries. Actually, 1/8 of an inch thickness is pretty achievable in that size range. And I'll start with a few that are a little bit less than. For instance, this Essie Vispa right here. Let's see, I don't want to rely on my eye chrometers for this one. Let me get you an exact measurement here. We're at 0.114, so just under 1/8 of an inch thick. And we have a broad enough blade with a full flat grind that it is going to cut like a pretty thin knife. And the price on this is very affordable, like $37 for this one right here with an AUS 8 blade. I believe it is an FRN handle, yes it is, and a stainless steel frame lock. So the whole knife carries nice and slim despite having a full 3.5 inches to work with there. Gonna be almost dropped it, sorry about that. Very nice slicey blade on the affordable end of the spectrum. I got a few others here that are about the same. You mentioned Spyderco and Civivi. Well, I've already shown a Spyderco and Civivi here that meet your criteria. The Indela here, 0.1145, so again, just under 1/8 of an inch. Price on these, quite affordable, or quite reasonable, I should say, for a Japanese-made knife nowadays, $92. And you've got 3.4 inches of VG10 steel with that full flat grind, and especially the further out towards the tip you're cutting, the thinner it is going to be. And that distal taper, which is what that's called, where the spine slowly tapers towards the tip, is another thing to consider. It's going to make this almost 1/8 inch thick knife, or 1/8 inch thick steel back here near the pivot, feel thinner the closer out towards the tip you go. So really, the area where you're cutting, just for example, let's see, let me try measuring it out here, right in front of the opening hole. We're at 0.109. So it's already a little bit thinner still than that 1/8 of an inch. So that's all part of the geometry of the knife doing the cutting. The Civivi Cogent we just looked at. Also, I measured this before, I think it's also 0.118. So very reasonable there. Thin edge is gonna cut really efficiently. High flat grind is gonna work great. Price on this knife is about $71.50, very attainable. You've got a coarse green micarta handle there, Nitro V blade steel, button lock flipping action. Very addicting and very satisfying, of course, to use. And of course, it's finger safe and very lefty friendly too. That could be a really good option. And fairly lightweight for its size and girth, I'd say about 3.4 ounces. Not too bad. Now these things are all kind of right up at knocking on the limit of the thickness you're looking for. The obvious answer that I haven't mentioned yet is something like the Benchmade Bug Out, which we've shown a lot lately, so I don't have it here on the table here. But that and some of its competitors like the Hogue Deca, now also available in a MagnaCut blade with an injection molded handle in addition to the 20CV version with G10. These are about $128 and you can get them in this modified Wharncliffe or a clip point blade, about 3¼ inches. So neatly splitting the difference there. But I think the one knife that is really pushing forward the limit of longer, thin blade options out there is the recently released Benchmade Tagged Out. Finally dropped this previous week. We've got a 3.5 inch blade, CPM 154. The thickness comes in at 0.89. Very, very thin. So we're talking something more along the lines of 3/32 of an inch rather than an eighth. We have got a full flat grind. You've got a little bit of taper once the clip point kicks in, because it's coming down and everything is getting a little bit narrower as it goes out towards the tip. Very, very precise and efficient slicer right here. Maybe that could be something that you're looking for. And speaking of lightweight for its size, this knife is 2.1 ounces for a 3.5 inch, truly full-sized knife experience. So very easy to carry and a very nice thin bladed pocket knife for you to take a look at. All right, now we come to the lightning round for today. Joe Miselli asks, greetings, it is almost apple picking season where I live. Any recommendations for a good apple knife to bring along? So this is kind of funny to think, because I've been apple picking and I've never needed a knife for the picking part, because you can just pick or you pick it off the ground. But I did have my bug out with me, and we did use it to slice an apple, which I think food prep would be like the one consideration you might want to consider for this type of knife. And in that case, a thinner blade is going to be ideal. Any of these knives from the previous question are going to work well. One thing I didn't mention there, though, that could be worth a really good look is something from Opinel, especially one of their synthetic versions, like this number 8 right here, the number 8 Outdoor. 39 bucks, you've got a Sandvik 12C27 blade, full flat grind, thin enough, it's gonna be efficient. You've got some serrations there if you do need to kind of like trim some stems or something, not that I think you will. You've got a lock. And if the kids get lost or you get lost separated from your party whilst in the apple grove, not likely, but you've got the whistle there to rally the troops, so to speak. Maybe check out that or any of the other thin-bladed pocket knife of choice. All right, next question in the lightning round comes from Robert Thelpus. Flipper tabs. It looks like they would tear up your pockets. Some more often than others, of course. What is your experience with that? Shredded pockets or not? I've honestly never had a problem with a flipper tab messing up the pocket, but this is where I'd love to hear from our comments section. Have any of you experienced that? If you're worried about it, maybe stick with something that either lacks any kind of jimping, or even if it has jimping, if it's not a too sharp type of jimping, and if the edges of the flipper tab are chamfered, so you don't have anything kind of sharp to grab. And honestly, most kind of are like that these days, so I don't anticipate that being a problem. Probably more of a consideration would be the actual texture on the handle underneath the clip. As any long-suffering knife addict will tell you, sometimes the texture from a knife can wear the outside of your pockets, wear the hem of your pockets over time. So maybe look at that instead. But again, comment section, let me know. Have you folks experienced flipper tabs messing up your pockets, or maybe the things in your pockets? Let us know. Finally, our final question of the day, our most serious question of the day, which comes from Kid666. Hey DCA, what blade would you carry if you were tasked with taking on the Predator? Thomas sees the knife on the table and he's already zooming out just a little bit, because classic movie, I think we can all agree. And it's all about getting to the chopper, right? So you gotta go to the chopper. Like perhaps this custom Jason Knight right here. The forged, fuller chopper, very kukri-esque, very vicious. Eh? Any better answers out there? Let me know. Anyway, that is all we have for this episode. Make sure to leave your questions down in the comments below, and it'll have a chance to get featured in a future episode. If you want to get your hands on any of these blades, there will be links in the description that take you over to KnifeCenter.com. And don't forget, we've got our Knife Rewards program too, which means if you're putting your money down on one of these knives today, you'll be earning some free money to spend on your next ones. I'm David C. Anderson from the Knife Center. That's Thomas behind the camera, and we're signing off. See you next time.